I want to talk about some key questions that you should ask in a software engineering interview. One of those is you have to ask about travel. Travel is really, really key to bring up at an early stage. For as an example, I applied to one company, and on LinkedIn, it has like the percentage of travel required, and it gives you a range, and it was 0 to 25. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, this is a software developer job, and why would there be travel? So I assumed 0, but it wasn't. It actually leaned way more towards 25%, almost to the tune of having to travel for a week at a time every 2 months. But that was like it was an undefined schedule. It could be more and it could be less. And that's pretty concerning, because if you don't even know, and if there's no defined schedule, you got to be cautious about that. So I kind of internalized that information because I asked about travel, and that came up. And that's a big thing for me, because this was a remote job, and having that amount of travel really is something to consider. So I considered it as I went through the interview process. And then I finally, after having another interview, I really thought about the travel component, and then I ended up dropping out of the interview. I sent him an email. I said, "Hey, I'm not sure that this is a right fit for me, given the travel requirements potentially." Another question is, you have to ask about if there is an on-call schedule. On-call is pretty common in software engineering. It basically is like, if there's a problem with the system, there's an engineer assigned to be on call basically over, all hours. So if there is a problem, they can get online and investigate pretty much. Every place treats this differently. Some places will have a dedicated support team that will handle that. Some places have a support team, and then they'll still have a rotational on-call engineer. Some places don't have a support team, and it falls all towards the engineers. So you really have to make sure what that looks like, and just understand that it's going to be one of those models, right? Somebody's going to be taking care of the issues if there is one overnight, right? Somebody's going to be doing that. Another ask, kind of similar to being on call, is what the deployment schedule looks like. How are the deployments handled? And what time are the deployments released? Is it automated or is it manual? Is somebody doing that after hours? Is somebody doing that on the weekends? Is somebody doing that early in the morning? When is that happening? What time is that actually occurring? And who does that? Is it the engineers? Do they have some kind of operations team? A lot of places do this differently. Some bigger companies will probably have a separate team. Smaller companies might, the developers may do everything. It really is dependent on the company. So you have to ask about that too, because if you get in a situation where you apply to a company that requires travel, has an on-call schedule, and the engineers handle the deployments, you may have just signed up for a job that doesn't fit your lifestyle, right? If you have all this extra hour time that you're spending, this job might not be the right fit for you. Another question is the support model. Is there a support team that handles talking to whatever customer is using the application if there's a problem, or are the developers talking to the customer? Are the developers going to be talking on the phone, triaging issues, or are they going to be talking to the support team who's already talked to the customer? So you really have to figure out what the communication there is. Who's the customer? Are you talking to them directly as a developer, or is it kind of being funneled through a support team? Because if you don't like talking on the phone to people, describing an issue and then having to kind of solution something on the spot, that might be a something to get more information about, because every place has a different model for this. With all these things I've brought up so far, at any place you go, there's probably going to be one of these categories that you don't like. There's probably going to be something about this company that you don't like in terms of one of these things. They might have an on-call schedule, but you may do no direct support with customers. There may be no on-call schedule, but you may be talking on the phone a lot. It really depends. And I think you're going to have to do a kind of a trade-off or a compromise probably anywhere you go. I want to talk about work hours next. This is something to definitely ask about. Some places have a really, really rigid 9 to 5 structure. Some places don't. Some places have different core working hours. Some places are like 9 to 6. Some places are 9 to 5. Some places unofficially include lunch. Some places very explicitly make you take, a lunch of this time. You really have to ask about that because it really will change how you structure your day. If the company is flexible and allows you to work earlier, that means you end your day earlier. If the company is more rigid, that means you're going to be working, 8:30 to 9 to 5, and there's no real opportunity to start earlier. So you really have to figure out what works and what the company allows you to do. Do they have a policy around when you can start? Can you start as early as you want to, or do you have to wait until the company officially opens or starts or something like that? So it's something to ask about. The other one that you should probably bring up is meetings. How many meetings will you typically have a day? Do you have a daily stand-up meeting? Do you have design meetings? Do you have meetings with customers directly? What does that look like? If you're having meetings with customers directly and you're talking to the people actually using your product, that might make you uncomfortable. Like, I don't really feel, personally, I would not want to do that. I don't really feel comfortable talking to customers of the product I'm working on directly, just because, I know of all the issues, and I don't really, I'm not looking for feedback a lot of times, especially right as I'm building the stuff. It just kind of, sometimes you can internalize that and you can think it can be kind of discouraging sometimes. So sometimes it's nice to have kind of a buffer, there, so you can, you're not feeling like you're kind of have to create a solution on the spot as you're on the phone. So ask about meetings. How many meetings are there? If there's a lot of meetings, if half the day's meetings, you might not like that. If there's only one stand-up meeting every day, if they have a regular stand-ups, just ask about that. Also, it might be nice to ask about what the team structure is like. Is everyone remote, or are you the only remote person? Are you working with people all, who are working in the office? Just those are things that might be helpful as you kind of think about what the meetings will potentially look like. Because if you're the only person on a webcam talking to people in a room, that's a little more difficult. And the last one to bring up, and this one is a little, you kind of have to play the game a little bit with this one. This one is the salary question. You got to get a salary range. You got to make sure that what you're talking about is even in the ballpark of what they're talking about. And again, the first interview where you kind of solicit all this information is really just a conversation. You're opening the conversation to whatever company you're applying for. And the elephant in the room is pay, right? But nobody likes to talk about pay until, at a predefined time. Some places or some people may tell you to not bring up salary expectations in the first interview. Some people may say, if they ask about it, try to defer the question. Honestly, sometimes I've been asked about salary in the first interview. A lot of times the application will have a range. This is where you have to kind of, I don't know if there's one right answer, to be honest with you. I think it's so dependent on the company and what position you're applying to. If you're applying to a software developer one position, you have the least amount of leverage in terms of salary, unfortunately, just because you're just getting your foot in the door. When I started my first software developer job, I didn't even negotiate my offer because I didn't know, I didn't have any experience doing that. So the salary was low end of average for software developers. And I can make a video going into the exact numbers if we want to do that. I don't know if that's helpful at all, but it was definitely on the lower end of averages. And then you know, in a corporate structure, you're probably going to get it varies, but anywhere from hopefully 3 to 6-ish% raise, around loosely around there. It really depends. At some places it's like 2.5. You really have to, and so just take your base, add on a couple bonuses after a year, and you can kind of get a good gauge of where you will be at after a couple of years. And that should give you like an idea of, okay, am I comfortable with the range that they're offering? And I use the word range because I think it should be discussed in a range. I don't think that you should say one number I don't think you should say one flat number because that kind of, again, this is part of the game. And I do not like this aspect at all, but you just have to just give a range and then just kind of talk about it and discuss it, what works, what doesn't. But salary range is a massive topic, and you don't want to neglect that conversation until the very end, until the offer comes in. But anyway, that's all I got for this one. I'll see you in the next one.